You know what wasn't a good game? Blasto! You'd better bring a mop because there's gonna be guts on the ceiling.
What did I do this time?
This is no time for jokes. It seems that evil alien tyrant Boss is up to his old tricks again.
Bosk? I thought that pear-headed psychopath was banished to the 5th dimension.
He was, but now he's back and he's mad. The very foundation of the free planetary system may be at stake. His forces are already massed for an invasion of the planet Uranus.
And you want me to take it back, eh?
Can you do it, Blasto?
Is a frog's butt watertight?
You know, it pains me to say, but Blasto just wasn't a good game. I like the idea of the game being a parody of old B-movies and movie serials, but the game just doesn't deliver in terms of gameplay. The game is a third-person action platformer where you as Blasto must save some space babes and stop the evil alien Bosk from taking over Uranus. Damn. Now, wait just a minute. This game sounds familiar. Saving babes, killing aliens. Never mind. There was never a game made like that in the 90s. Now, I can remember playing through some of the demos on the demo discs at the time, but that is the extent of my experience of when the game initially came out. Now, Sony was trying really hard to market Blasto back then, but it didn't help much. Blasto came out March 31st, 1998, to middling reviews, to say the least, about the game. Now, I imagine opinions on the game haven't changed much over the past 22 years, but that is just my assumption. Poor Blasto. He just so happened to be sandwiched in a year where great games came out like
Metal Gear Solid, yeah.
With playing the game today, it's not that good. The game doesn't look good or play well. I mean, I believe what this game is really lacking is an auto-aim feature. I mean, just to have a choice in the matter would help. Basic aiming in the game comes down to you turning around standing in place, or by strafing the enemy into your line of fire. It is just incredibly awkward. Even trying to use the analog sticks isn't much better. So we are so spoiled with the controls of modern games these days, so naturally this game is going to be a chore or a little bit cumbersome to come back to. But my god, even trying to turn on a switch in this game is a pain. Just look how long it took me to press this one button. The platforming in this platforming game is god awful. I am constantly undershooting and overshooting the next platform. Traversing with the jetpack isn't much better to control with either. Also, nothing screams space shooter game like climbing on space shipping containers. So with bad controls for shooting and platforming in this platforming shooter, I can't say I can recommend this game to pretty much anyone. And what is with that hair? Is that Sly Cooper's cane? He looks like he had a three-way with Space Ghost and a Baby Bell. Also, remember not to press this button. Now what sucks is I think this game could have been good given the premise. But for me, with any game I play, it boils down to if the gameplay is good, then I can deal with it. I know it's difficult to convey how a game feels over a video. Unless you've played the game before, I don't know how else to explain it, but this problem wasn't exclusive to Blasto in this time period. So let's look at some shooting mechanics of the PlayStation 1 shooter scene within the last year of Blasto coming out. needless to say, the bar wasn't very high. I mean, Resident Evil and MDK are good in their own right, but the quality was all over the place. And that's the problem with this era of shooters. Everything was uncharted territory. There was no standard for camera movement even with the introduction of the analog sticks. 1 year after Blasto, Siphon Filter comes out with a lock-on target for shooting. So we were starting to see a slight progression in the shooter scene on consoles with games adopting the lock-on mechanic to compensate for poor camera control. Now let's look at the platforming side of things. Here are some examples of other games from 1998.
This I can use. Iridescent lighting. I like it.
This is like a luau at Mel Blanc's house.
I'm on top of the world, Ma!
Now there was good competition on this side of the equation, and depending on whether or not you like Gex making dated 90s references throughout the entire game.
This is like a luau at Mel Blanc's house. Looks like Bugs Bunny after the trots.
That could easily make my list of what wasn't a good game. I wanted to draw on these comparisons of other games because I believe it is important to contextualize as much as possible the state of the shooting mechanics and platforming when Blasto made its way onto store shelves. I am curious to see how this game would play and look by today's standards. We've seen the Crash and Spyro games get completely remade from the PS1 era, but Blasto doesn't have near the same kind of love or adoration from fans. I would especially like to see if Hartman's voiceover work could be restored from it sounding like the booth was inside of a barrel that was downsampled to hell.
Hot damn, I'm good. I'm back, but this time I brought a friend with me. Let me introduce you to Mr. Fishin' Blaster.
One question I want to ask is, if this game was released today, how would it fare? Would people embrace it, or would it fall by the wayside like it did in 1998? I think it could have a chance, but also it would more than likely only appeal to a subsect of the people who play video games. 1, people who are curious about how well it would play with today's conventions, and 2, people who say, "Hey, I remember that game. I never played it, but might as well try it now." At least with the Spyro and Crash games, there is that cult following which led to good sales of their respective remakes. I believe that the issues of movement and control would be remedied given the evolution of games over the past 18 years since. Games seem to control better now since we've had developers able to work through the difficult time period of, "Hey, what should we use this whole other analog stick for?" I don't know, definitely not camera control, so you can forget that. Now you might be asking yourself, why does it sound like a guy who laughs like he smokes 5 packs of cigarettes a day making a video game with James Mason? Didn't he die like 10 years ago or something before this game came out? I don't know. I don't know the answer to those questions. Looking back on Blasto, it just isn't anything to shake a well-manicured and maintained stick at. The controls are terrible, the environments aren't much better, and there's positively no depth to the overall gameplay experience. Not the worst game on the PlayStation, but very far from the best. And it is quite unfortunate because at the time this game was being promoted, it looked like a game I could get some enjoyment out of. Regrettably, Phil Hartman can't elevate Blasto to cult classic status given the shortcomings of the game. With that, I feel that this is just a letdown for me personally. Maybe this can be a guilty pleasure for some people who happen to be curious about the experience of some console games in 1998, but beyond spending a few minutes playing the game, I can't recommend it. And with that, I think it's time to move on to better games. Or worse games, depending on how I'm feeling.